Hello everyone, welcome to the business case writing webinar. Just a few words about myself. I'm working as a capability development consultant, running courses like these online and in practice, and this is really the goal of a business case writing workshop, which takes normally a day. And we look into the business case writing from a bigger picture and highlight the responsibilities of a business case writer. And the emphasis of the one-day workshop is really on practicing. Unfortunately, we cannot do this in this short, free overview. If you look at the workshop structure, this is divided into two modules, one on the foundation concepts, another on the pragmatic understanding. And you can see that there are, after we talked about the basics and about how to align your business case to your organizational strategy and analyzing stakeholders, we run a first exercise. We go then into the business case principles a bit deeper and look at the elements and structure of a business case before we run a longer exercise after that. That is normally then the first half of the day. We then look into deepening our understanding by looking at strategies and models, running another exercise, and looking at planning, and then refining the draft that emerged during the day. That is supported by using the material in the appendix around templates, checklists, writing skills, and a few scenarios. Okay, let's get started with this. What is a business case and how does it fit into our business model? The advantages really of a business case is that it assists stakeholders to make decisions about the feasibility of a proposed project. So your business case is linked to a project. It also explains the idea and the opportunity and any related risks. It discusses alternatives, looks at impact analysis, provides a cost and benefit analysis, and as I said earlier, it's there to persuade key decision makers to accept the recommendation. That can also be expressed graphically. If we look here at the typical business case development path, we're moving from developing, gathering the right information or the required information, to maintaining, verifying, and confirming. And that is supporting this underlying typical project flow from the pre-project phase to the initiation, subsequent delivery, final delivery stages, and any post-project requirements. So you see, if we look at these arrows at the bottom, there are different phases. We have a development phase or a develop business case mode, and we've got another one which is more about maintaining the business case once it's there and accepted and the project has been kicked off. And you see at that stage, around the pre-project and initiation stage, we look at verifying the outline. We move on in the process to verifying more detail. And during the maintain business case phase, we really look at keeping things updated, making sure that the information is still relevant. In another picture or diagram, we can express the idea of a business case like that. So we're moving from customer requirements to the project initiation and the project planning. Here in this project, or in this approach, you see how the business case is really supporting your project charter, and that you move on from the initiation to the planning. And here you really get into the meat of a business case around risk, integration, cost, scope, quality, time. That is then a plan that is sitting on top of your business case. It really depends on your organization. The way that a workshop is laid out is we're talking about different existing models that are out there. Some organizations work to Prince 2 standards. Other organizations have a project management book of knowledge approach or a PMP approach where they follow and touch on items such as, or ways of measurement such as return on investment, future value, net present value, payback period, internal rate of return, cost versus benefit analysis. So how deep you want to go into this really depends also on your needs and expectations in the organization. If you're not an accountant or a financial expert, that is for you already a sign that you typically you're the owner of writing a business case, but you are dependent on a team that provides you with information to make your business case solid. So other organizations work with the ITIL strategy. Here, a business case is around the justification of expenditure, benefits, options, issues, risks, and possible problems. And what's important to keep in mind is here that your business case serves the purpose for any organization to determine exactly what it wants to achieve and what can be done, rather than the document used to obtain funding. Other models out there that are more in the agile space or the lean startup space, they write business cases too. So it is really depending on the model your organization is based on. And you might even shift from one of these models to another. Let's look at aligning projects with the organizational strategy. How does the business case come into that? Well, that picture shows you that we start out from a situational analysis, finding a response to where we are today, and stating where we want to go, showing goals, objectives, and the mission, and move from there to working out or showing, describing how you actually get there by formulating your strategy. This planning is then complemented by a strategic implementation and control approach that looks at long-term direction, integrated programs, and financial projections. So it's important to keep in mind that your business case serves a larger idea around strategy. It's about aligning your business case to the strategic fit. It's about crafting market solutions, performance. It's about timing, and your statements about cost benefits, they have to be tied back to time frames. It's about investing to see whether there is a competitive advantage that your business case either describes or helps to work out. It's important to keep in mind what impact or in what context your business case works from a customer intimacy point of view, but also from an operational excellence and product leadership point of view. So in the workshop we go into deeper detail what that means. Here at this point let's just highlight these three areas. The stakeholders analysis, it's really about best starting with a stakeholder map that you visualize who is among the stakeholders, to understand their interest in the project, to determine the position of each group. Are these stakeholder supporters? Are they neutral players that still need to be kept in the loop, or are they outright opponents, and how strong is their opposition? So within that context you have to determine how powerful you are yourself as the business case writer. And looking at these first 4 bullet points, this is really your material from which you have to deduct your analysis. It's best to work visually here. That is one option of putting your stakeholders in quadrants of high support and high impact, or high position, low impact, or high impact, and to play that through. I've got an example here, and so your latent players or stakeholders need to be satisfied. You really want to focus on the promoters, on the upper red box, and manage them closely. But not every player has the same degree of importance throughout. That might change. So you might even need to draw a stakeholder map that changes over time. But I would recommend that you use visual elements during that analysis and not just verbal techniques or written techniques. We've got another example here from the healthcare industry. If we say our customer or our client is the patient in the middle, a stakeholder analysis would involve asking questions around the habitat or the world in which that patient lives, and ask about these players and list them, visualize them, and spend time on thinking about what's important for them, why are they involved, why are they having an impact. So depending on the organization you're working in and you're writing a business case for, this picture will obviously change. But try to think about these various groups, spend some time on really reflecting on who's involved. Don't rush that. If there are stakeholders that you forget and they come back later on, you might have a problem. So to just summarize the basics of a business case, it's about capturing the reasoning for initiating a project. A business case does not yet implement. It helps you to create a solid foundation and a measurement throughout the execution of the project. There are some rules that you need to follow to write a compelling business case. So think about constructing your case logically in a persuasive way, and make sure that the information you collect are credible and are also relevant to the project. A business case will then capture also quantifiable and unquantifiable items, and it can range. There is no one right business case. The range is from formal to more informal, larger projects, smaller projects, also depending on the business model that is applicable to your case. So let's look at some principles here. The first one is really about asking questions around the benefits and the risks and how they relate to each other from start to finish. And you see here that there's also the option of saying no and stopping the project. That is quite a radical solution to looking at a project, and it, as we know, not that often happens. But it is really a way of measuring whether you're still creating value with what you're doing. The next principle is around learning from experience. So is that business case the first that you ever write, or is it actually contributing to almost like a library of organizational knowledge in your company or organization? So when writing a business case, have a look at what's there already. You might be able to, benefit from existing business cases, lessons learned. It's also important that you define roles and responsibilities, that you are really clear on who is responsible for what and how you communicate that out to your stakeholders. It's also depending on how you manage your projects, whether you, for example, apply metrics where you have people reporting to a functional manager and to a project manager, or whether that doesn't exist at all. All that has an impact on how to define your roles and responsibilities. Make sure that your plan ties in with a realistic project management approach that is managed based on stages around the initiation and the planning. And then you want to make sure that there is an element of managing by exception. So let the team that is humming and flowing through the implementation of the project, let them do what they have to do. If there are deviations from the normal course, that is also where business management, business case writing can support project management. Okay, let's look at the elements and structures and the structure of a business case. If you look at that kind of table of contents, you look at elements that are around a preface, a section that helps to analyze. The preface ideally should be only coming after the executive briefing, a conclusion, and also an introduction. So the order of that slide isn't that great. So think of this more of a collection of building blocks that you want to put together in the right order. As we said earlier, a business case is really around building confidence and accountability when making investment decisions. We want to show that the project has internal support and provide evidence and justification for continuing. So there is a bit of reinforcement of what we have said earlier already. Let's look at 6 strategies. Make sure, the first, to link your project to current business priorities, involve the right people, identify and communicate with decision makers, identify project risks and development strategies, describe and quantify all business costs and benefits, and consider a range of funding options. It's important to, not just for the funding options, but maybe in other elements as well, to try to define ranges of acceptable decisions rather than driving your case home for one particular point decision. Remember that a business case is supporting a decision-making process, that this is also tied into a choosing from different choice or options, and your business case should support that. You can see that we're going into deeper detail here around what it means to link your project, what it means to involve the right people, to identify and communicate with decision makers. Let you quickly read that rather than me just repeating what you can see. Okay, the second slide to give you a bit more detail. Then there are a few techniques that you should apply for your own benefit, but also you can include analysis elements like a fishbone diagram into your business case as such as well. So the way it works, you identify certain criteria and you dig deeper on them and see how that impacts on your business case, as shown in this example here. So looking around the problem definition and symptoms and causes and possible solutions. And if you look at, for example, who's involved, just try to branch out levels that are underlying these overall overarching categories. Make sure that when you look at the impact analysis, that you look at possible solutions from different angles, which includes a blue sky positive approach of scenario and also a risk analysis around negative impact. When writing a business case, what we found helpful is what we call a 7-step process model. It looks like this. So there is a bit of a structure and order to this, but see that as a guide rather than a fixed template to follow. There should be an element around defining the business needs and outcomes, the analysis of options, important, the cost and risk identification, the value analysis, investment and how to manage it, justification and recommendations. Let's look at these different steps in more detail. So, defining the business needs. There are again several techniques that can be applied. Business analysis comes into this to some extent, but don't limit yourself to business analysis techniques. Try to go beyond that. It's about eliciting the information that might be there but dormant. It's almost, in some cases, a question of getting a cross-functional team in the room, or also simulating different players if you can't get them in. If you look at the bottom, there is also an element of change management involved. So your business case needs to reflect on that as well. When you look at the analysis of the different options that we have worked out based on the data we collected and the conversations we had, it's really around evaluating these and listing possible options. And comprehensive really depends then again on how technical, for example, your business case is, or whether it is asking for support, or whether it, for example, dives deep into a financial matter. Make sure that you have a short list of a rationale and what viable options you consider. So that last point here, I would encourage you to depart from maybe more technical analysis that you have in the previous step, and your shortlist should come back to a concise, simple way of expressing yourself in English rather than in jargon or technical terms. You see that the risk assessment is closely leaning on the work that comes out of the Project Management Institute around risk management, the PMP approach around planning, identifying, analysis, response, monitoring, and control. Here, different areas of risk, technical and financial, as well as business change or organizational risks. You see that what I said earlier, the range of a business case can be quite wide. So make sure that you know what the focus is. Finding focus can be achieved by applying some of these techniques that use visualization. And you see on the right-hand side how we also document these risks in a risk register. It's just a template, and you see how that can then be translated with becoming more specific about the total cost of ownership, looking at estimated CapEx and OpEx figures, and what goes beyond these two, so capital expenditure and operational expenditure, and additional project expenses and miscellaneous items that come on top of that. You see how we then, on the right-hand side, collect that in a table. And it leads us into a related value analysis around different functionality. Here in that example, it would be easiest to imagine a software development project around features that can be developed. What are the benefits for our customers for this, and how much money we are actually making out of it. And here, of course, the question is around supporting that approach or not, going forward with it or stopping the project. But for making these decisions, you need that measurement that a business case really helps you to establish, to document, and to make visible so that you can share that information in a consistent manner. You see that an overall investment plan would look like this. So you've got an overall management plan, governance plan, project management plan, and that then branches out in different areas that you monitor, underlying plans. The business case sits right in the middle of those. Imagine your business plan to almost slice through this. You can clearly list the justification and the recommendation around the elements that should be covered by a business case, around organizational indicators, opportunities, the business outcomes, benchmark comparisons, the internal capability to implement, which, for example, raises questions around make or buy, the risk assessment, costs and benefits. You see here the related questions that you should ask when you think about these categories. This picture is really around what does it cost for you to do what you're doing, and how how do you really create value for your customer because of that. And there are different elements that play into that. Yeah, your costs involve thinking about the brand that you have, the content creation, and benefits, for example, is more around, do you with your brand really build leadership in your space, which you're active as a company or organization, service provider, and how that what you're doing is enhancing the brand. You see how we go step by step deeper into also a financial cost and benefit analysis that is tied back to the more of a narrative business case that we have talked about so far. The three questions that you really want to ask when looking into a cost-benefit analysis is the option worthwhile financially? Is it the best option? Should it be considered at all? And from here you want to go into a listing down in a spreadsheet of the capital and operational expenditures and overheads, and tie that back to your sales of goods and services. If you have a look at that example, here we really look at a director exploring an option to implement a new automated contact management and sales processing system. This business case here is really expressed as a narrative, and if we go to the next example, we express the same idea with the information that we have gathered purely in numbers. And your business case would need to contain both. So a narrative and a numerical section. And if you look at these different areas where you can dig deeper into, for example, the net present value, there's a typo here, and the internal rate of return. So that really depends on how thorough you want to polish your business case from a financial point of view. Let's summarize. The questions you really want to ask when writing your business case is: who will be responsible for approving your proposal? When do you need to have the proposal completed? Are there established guidelines or templates that you will need to follow? What level of accuracy is required for your financial costing? We'll get back to that in a minute, the level of accuracy. Are there people with experience and expertise that you can call on or advise as you develop your business case proposal? And how much time and resources are available to help you develop your business case? If we look at this here, a good rule of thumb is for projects that involve a large capital investment, your level of accuracy should be around the ±10%. For smaller projects, you are looking, as a rule of thumb, of a level of accuracy of around ±30%. And you see that a business plan for a large investment is probably not what one individual writes. There is probably a team involved with writing the business case, whereas for smaller projects it's most likely that there is one person responsible for authoring that business case. You see, you want to make sure that you are covering all the avenues that you best tap into when collecting the data for your business case by looking at the experts that are available for you, in-house or externally. And you also need to stay realistic, and you cannot go on with writing a business case forever. You need to be clear on what the timelines are, and that of course is very different from organization to organization. Make sure, the last point here, that you raise issues as early as possible, and almost make sure that you have a cadence or a feedback loop, a circle of having conversations around the progress of your business case that happen quite often, rather than only every now and then with huge breaks in between where you cannot communicate any progress or ask for help. There's also a pictorial approach to express a summary of writing a business case, so make sure that you start with describing the reason for approving the project, then give more detail on specifications to achieve the outcomes, provide the necessary the information that is necessary to validate the options and the risks and the operational requirements that you come up with. And don't forget that you use the business case as an artifact, as a tool to provide confidence in implementing the project, which is hugely depending on streamlined and transparent communication. Be aware that there are also more traditional approaches of writing a business case. The traditional approach more starting with the assumption that you need to know all before you start, which is quite a challenge and hardly ever possible. The same goes with the decision making. It also depends on the type of project, of course, in the industry you are in. A mining project and a huge public sector project and a business case for this needs to depend on some of this knowledge at the beginning. It cannot just evolve. Whereas a software development project, for example, could be a bit more flexible on some, well, once you have worked out the architecture needs, but it can be a bit more flexible on solutions that emerge, and here you can afford to delay some of the decisions. The incremental approach is, I find, a bit more realistic to what's happening. There is some critical knowledge that we need for the project and for the business case as a support element that we simply cannot have at the beginning. So there is more of an incremental approach rather than taking a all or nothing approach. There is a more piecemeal approach where you allow for knowledge to emerge. Just to wrap up, there are a few templates around this. You see, that's probably clearer than the slide that we've seen earlier. That's around an executive summary, overview, analysis section, moving on from there to the investment management and the justification and recommendations, and any supporting sections. The more technical, you probably want to have more appendices. Another approach is just moving from the problem to the solution, suggesting approaches and making statements around risk management, risk assessment, and value analysis. We've got the corresponding questions to that here. A more leaner approach would put your business case on one page, typically in A3, where you look at your customer segment and problem or challenge or opportunity, the value, unique value proposition, or almost sometimes called the unfair advantage, solutions, the key success factors, and also then add costs, the cost structure, the revenue and business value. That is another way of putting a business case together. A checklist, there's a lot of common sense in there when you write a, it's like writing any other document. Look at the right structure, but then specifically for a business case, check in on the scope and achievability, on the objectives, costs, the benefit analysis, assumptions, alternatives, cash flow analysis, timelines, and stakeholders. All this is a good list for you to see whether you've covered all these points. This is a checklist that gives you a bit more detail, really prompting you. Don't feel obliged to necessarily find information to each bullet point. Take that as a as a guidance. And there's always an element of you filling in the context in which you're working. But these bullet points around these categories are good pointers to work with. Okay, that was the presentation. Let's see whether there are any questions at that point.